This video is brought to you by Manscaped. Stick around to hear more about the discount that they are providing to the entire upper echelon community. Okay, today I'll be finally giving my impressions for Outriders based on their demo offering, which in my opinion actually does in fact give a rather good understanding of the game's depth, even if it's contained to the early levels. This has been a highly requested topic, and I don't normally say that because often it's like one or two people, but a lot of people are really interested in Outriders this time, so it has been highly requested, and I do intend to stream the game on release. That's April 1st is launch day, and I'll be heavily covering it on top of that, provided I can get interested enough to sink the time in, which right now seems very, very likely. General overview, Outriders is a typical looter shooter. Get gear, select skills, use gear and skills to kill enemies, get more gear and more skills. It's not uncommon, it's not unique, but from what I can tell, it also has an added and appreciated twist where quality of life has actually been considered from day one, rather than avoided for a year after launch in favor of God only knows what, like far too many games have actually done these past couple years. I want to do a bit of a compliment sandwich, if you will, today. I'll start with stuff I like to soothe the inevitable fanboys. I'll cycle into some of the things that seem not so good, which is when their blood boils and they start smashing out all the angry comments in the comment section. And then I'll douse them with another round of things that are very, very good to cool them back down. It doesn't always work, but hey, it's worth a try. Before going further, a word from today's video sponsor, because March is a month about balls. Basketballs, but also your balls. And Manscaped has partnered up with the Testicular Cancer Society to spread awareness for men's health and early cancer detection. Basically, to save some balls. Over 2 million men all across the world trust Manscaped, and they now offer Crop Mop Ball Care Wipes infused with cooling aloe vera in addition to their other products. The main attraction, their Lawnmower 3.0, is cordless, waterproof, and carefully crafted to serve its purpose. With the link down below, you can get 20% off with free international shipping when using code UPPER. Also, with this limited time offer, you can get 2 free gifts, the Shed Travel Bag and the Manscaped Anti-Chafing Boxer Briefs as well. Together, TCS and Manscaped are committed to raising awareness for men's testicular cancer, which is the most common form of cancer for men ages 15 to 35 as part of their We Save Balls initiative. Again, use the link down below and code UPPER for 20% off, free shipping, and 2 free gifts. Big thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring the channel. Let's begin with something I like. Outriders, while operating as a cooperative looter-shooter adventure, also has elements of a single-player linear world to it. This might seem insignificant to some people, but it isn't, because what it allows the developers to do is create more meaningful simulated choices than almost any other competing looter-shooter on the entire market. For example, in Tom Clancy's The Division, the original one, which was my main game for thousands of hours at the time and quite literally helped me launch the entire channel, there are minor elements of a developing world. They're extremely minor, but not really even, because the emphasis is more heavily placed on cooperative and persistent social aspects, which effectively cut down on how special any one player can actually feel within the context of the game's legitimate story and lore. Outriders kind of seems like it's heading down a different path, and while drop-in, drop-out co-op will exist on launch day, the emphasis is more heavily placed on you being the hero of this world. There are decisions, even in the demo, that make it clear how your surroundings will evolve and change based on your decisions, and it's not some sort of Fallout-esque RPG core. It's not going to be huge decisions, and I don't anticipate like 100 different endings or something like that, but it's finding a sort of middle ground that actually seems like a pretty decent place to be. True to form, there are classes, subsequently granting abilities and placing you within a loosely enforced archetype role. There is a passive tree, and then there is the gear. The classes each have 7 core abilities, and 3 of these can be active at any one time. This is where we get into the positive aspect of deceptively deep customization. And I say this because many people might look at this on a surface level and think, wow, lame, not much there, but in reality, I think there is. In many games, the individual customization aspects end up becoming relatively separate. Your gear is treated as its own min-maxed unit of stats. Your skills might synergize with it loosely, but they don't interact beyond drawing from some sort of raw numerical stat value. Well, in Outriders, that's not really the case. 7 skills to choose per archetype means 35 combinations. Yes, some will be fairly similar, and also yes, many of them will be stronger or weaker to an extreme where they become unusable or flat out useless. Hint, that's in the negatives, but the core 7 skills being rotated in and out depending on mission selection or role responsibility, with only 3 active at any one time, means depth within the overall class. What matters far more, though, is how gear interacts with these skills. Gear itself will often have at least 1 stat modifier for one of your core 7 skills, and these modifiers can be pretty huge. As a trickster, for example, the game's highly mobile, melee-based assassin-type class, effectively a rogue, if you look at other games as an example or a template, you can have your initial blade sweep melee attack, but then modify it with gear to have a second swing. You can then give it a shield recharge on top of that, or extend the duration of its paralysis segment, and that's just from the gear that you're wearing. Also, that's probably the least interesting example of a skill being modified. As a Technomancer, the sniper support healer class, kind of, you can have proximity mines and then get 2 different pieces of gear, which will each individually add another proximity mine. You will then throw 3 of them every time, and one at a time, 1, 2, 3. And in addition, you can modify the range or the damage or add a bleed or any number of things with further gear selections. Effectively, you can take one skill that you like the most and subsequently modify it 2, 3, 4, even 5 times or more. And you can also mix that up between the 3 skills or whatever. And I'll discuss that in a second because there's more options there, which will let you transform from a basic set of 7 skills, allowing for roughly 35 combinations, though probably some of them are useless, admittedly, and immediately jacks that up to thousands. You can throw tons of bombs, create armies of turrets, constantly teleport around like a character out of the movie Jumper, etc., etc. And the demo obviously doesn't let me see the full scope of all of these options yet, and it certainly doesn't speak to balancing during endgame, not at all, but the framework is there. Now, when I say 5 or more modifications, I mean that I've seen gear circulating that has 2 skill modifiers. I didn't get any in the demo yet. I'm still farming and playing. It might be fun to just keep going, but I don't have any personally, but I've seen it. And I can't speak to how rare it will eventually be. Seems pretty rare at the moment, though higher world tiers, better drop rates, whatever. Or if there's a randomization component where legendary gear with 2 skill stats can possibly roll from a pool of choices. But if you're able to get 2 skill stats for 1 piece of gear, which you can then reach 6, 8, even 10 different modifiers for your core skills. And while you cannot actually have duplicate perk rolls, there are perks with duplicate effects and different names. Also, the crafting allows you to extract these mods from what you dismantle, meaning that unless there are, as of yet, unknown restrictions on that process, which I don't think there are, you will amass a library of gear mods that make the building process far easier, more convenient, and rewarding than most other looter shooters on the entire market ever even get close to. Ultimately, your set of 7 abilities will become far deeper than what is shown on the surface, and when you extend that across 4 separate class archetypes, it becomes clear that there will be many different ways to play this game. Combine that with an emphasis on each individual player instead of an emphasis on how you fit in with other players in the world, and you have a looter shooter that, in my opinion, sets itself up very well to succeed. Now we get to talk about the things I don't like, so bear with me for this part. For starters, there is a hefty amount of repetition in the passive skill tree. It seems like every single individual tree has effectively the same things, just different names and different main weapon types. You have weapon damage after movement skill, weapon damage after damage skill, weapon damage after ordnance skill, just a different name for the exact same thing, and so on and so forth. You have cooldown reduction, anomaly power, and a bunch of weapon-specific nodes, which will focus on shotgun, assault rifles, or snipers, as well as further duplications that make the passive tree by far the least interesting aspect of the game. It's not actually even bad, keep that in mind, and still better than many other games out there compared to this title, but still, the skill and gear synergies are much more obviously well-crafted. The weak link is the passive tree. You will get caught on terrain sometimes when you're running around. The targeting will sometimes be pretty janky, especially shotguns in my experience. They're not so bad, but like a little bit of the aiming and shooting can be janky. And worst of all, there are loading screens everywhere. The developers are working on this, and it has to do with the accommodation of co-op, I'm pretty sure, but oh man, like clockwork, there will be a few minutes of hectic combat and then a loading screen. A few minutes of combat, loading screen, over and over and over. They're short loading screens. It's nothing like Anthem, rest assured, but it was a negative. I could skip the animation and make them super quick, as I said, but it really comes down to a disruption in pacing and a sense of fragmentation to the world. It doesn't need to be open world, not by any stretch. That's not what I'm saying. But when the whole thing starts to feel like a series of tiny rooms instead of an actual traversable space, there might be a problem with that. I don't think I have an issue with the level design itself in terms of layout. If I could just run from room to room without a loading screen every single time, that would be fine. But where it stands now, I do consider the format to be extremely irritating. The last negative is balancing. There are some skills that are just completely batshit broken, and others that are comparatively awful. Now, focusing on PvE, that's not really an issue, actually, because they don't need to balance for fairness in player versus player scenarios, but let me put it this way. I enjoy the power fantasy. I normally play rogues, and thus I played a large chunk of the trickster archetype in this demo, farming for blue items and progressing my character. However, the Devastator, the tank type, that's really what it is, which is an archetype I almost never play in other games ever. Like, I always play rogue or something like that. I never play tank. Has such a broken raw form ability. I could clear entire rooms with a single button press through walls with 0 modifications from gear. If that is how the balancing is now, well, endgame typically becomes an exacerbated extreme of all the minor flaws that you see early on. Things that start small, like damage and armor in the original Division game, become exponentially worse the longer you go. It becomes an issue that grows over time, to a point where the whole squad dies to one single shotgun blast, and the developers have to fly 12 people across the planet in real time. Like, I'm talking about the real world, including myself for that journey, to help fix the broken infrastructure, because the small things become so bad they tank the game. I can already sense massive build potential with massive exploitation and balancing problems on top. That's not even a deal breaker for me. Really, it's not even that bad if you just don't care about those things. If you can still find a few combinations, especially with each class, whichever one you prefer, to overcome those issues. But right now, the classes aren't even close to comparable. Not saying they need to be identical in power levels or functionality, but it's pretty extreme. When the game launches, I'll do guides and builds, etc., so no need for that right now. However, the balancing as it stands indicates to me that endgame is going to be kinda rocky. It might be, relatively speaking, significantly better than other looter shooters from recent memory on the market, Avengers, Anthem, etc. The bar is extremely low, but I had to state that balancing will be a major focal point here. That's it for the things I didn't like. Now back to the closing positives. This game, even in its raw demo form with 7 levels and 5 world tiers, created an actual, farmable, and engaging gear loop, and in my opinion, that's insane. 2 main missions and 4 side missions left me actually farming for hours and hours building out my character. I was at World Tier 5 of 15. If that is even remotely balanced properly, the progression from tier to tier might end up creating an amazing endgame system for progressively larger rewards, but even if it's not balanced properly, the vendor and crafting systems can pick up the slack. Most games, somehow, it's baffling, I have no idea how, manage to screw up the concept of a simple item vendor time and time again. I don't understand how it can happen so badly so many times, but thankfully, big thing here, Outriders has found a way to not replicate age-old mistakes of its predecessors. The vendors are on a short, like 30-minute, sometimes an hour, I guess, but it feels random and disconnected between discount items and actual stock. But anyways, vendors have a stock that rotates basically every half hour to 45 minutes. This stock of gear lets you buy, dismantle for mods, remember that, or slot the items into your loadout so that you are always checking in on something valuable between missions when you visit city hubs. That can't be overstated. Most loot-based games suffer from a lack of gear flow. That's kind of what I like to call it, gear flow. You either get everything too fast and the game sort of falls apart, or you get nothing for so long that you quit because useless gear drops. Okay, pause. Even though I am so sick of casual players who say, I just want the good gear and I don't want to get stuff that isn't an upgrade ever. Shut the You actually ruin games like The Division 2. People like that legitimately ruin games. But anyways, useless gear drops, I admit, in excess can be frustrating. Well, vendor stock every half hour, the ability to sell, deconstruct for just a mod that you really want, and supplement what is found with what is bought and crafted in a way that cycles through faster than other looter shooter titles out there. Yes, gear flow is critical, and Outriders, so far, gets it right. That's incredible to see. The game has so much potential, I am honestly very excited for it. It would take the mother of all bouncing snafus to actually push me away at this point, and I intend to, again, play, cover, and stream the game on release, so if you have any interest at all in that, hit subscribe and wait for the 1st. April 1st is when it comes out. It's not perfect, but it's got some great fundamental choices and quality of life decisions that make it something worth anticipating, in my opinion. Also, devs don't typically offer a real demo anymore. They say beta and make it a pre-order bonus for maximum returns, like 2 weeks before launch when nothing can actually change, so it's not a beta. Anyways, seeing a real, properly labeled and fun demo, that's a big positive. But that's it. My impressions so far can be sort of summed up as high degrees of customization, excellent gear economy from what I've seen, and serious potential. Possible balancing or world tier issues, maybe, but that can be fixed, probably, because the foundation appears to be there and solid. Very happy to see it. If you want to support, links down below. If you like the content, consider watching on Odyssey, which is a YouTube platform alternative that greatly rewards its creators. Again, linked down below. Also locals, $5 a month, and you can watch completely ad-free uploads, as well as have a direct line of communication to me for feedback or questions or whatever. You can make your own posts and talk to that community. I'm trying to build that out more, so locals linked down below. Also another gaming YouTuber to support, merch, social media, etc., but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching. Very excited for Outriders, and have a nice night.